Hello and welcome to Bolt Action Reloading. In today's video we're going to discuss the progress we've made in our Thompson Center Compass 300 Win Mag project. Stick around. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here and you'd like to see how I and the rest of you here make our group smaller, start now by subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell icon. That way you get notified when I post new videos and you won't miss anything. Guys, I know that there have been several questions on how this project is going, and I have not had an update on this channel since the 18th of August, 2018, unless anybody's counting. And you know, if I have to say the year, it's been a long time. At that point in time, we were flying high. We'd actually been able within our first 10 rounds to achieve that first sub-MOA group, and it was all sunshine and lollipops. Except it wasn't. I hadn't quite decided what to call this video yet. I'm sure you've seen what it is. If it's trouble with 300 Win Mag or problems with 300 Win Mag or considerations, something along that nature, but it certainly has not been sunshine and lollipops up until this point. Right up early, guys, I'm going to tell you, in my video I'll probably reference a couple things from Johnny's Reloading Benches video on this, which is newly released and finally motivated me to get off my butt and make this video. If you guys actually remember from our last update, the first rounds we ran through a barrel was from actual very old factory 180 grain core lock by Remington. Overall, it really had some horrible statistics, but honestly very acceptable groups. Like I said, we did hit that first under MOA group within the first 10 shots through the rifle. Put a group on the screen, and with a start like this, I really was convinced that we were going to have a great shooting rifle, and it was going to be a breeze. Boy, was I wrong. Full disclaimer, those shots were fired out of my lead sled that you see here on the reloading bench, and honestly, my next range of the trip actually included it as well. Initially, this video was going to end up being walking through all of the bullets we had to try and showing some examples of what groups we could get. Except, there's not really a great amount to show you, but there is a lot of information to tell. I've thought about 100 different ways of trying to make this video. I probably picked the wrong one, but there's really a ton of information to go over. And if you're interested in this project, you're going to want to stick around for all of it. Just bear with my order. First of all, let's talk about where we went. We thought we would actually go and check all the, when I say heavier weight bullets that I have on hand. We started at the 150 grain and went higher. I do have some 110 grain VMAXs, but I really didn't intend to shoot those in this rifle. Maybe someday, but it was not my idea of what we should try right out of the gate. So what you see before you is what we had on the shelf, and leveraging a little bit off of the data we got with our 338 Lapua project, the CCI 250s did a wonderful job, and so that is the primer that we were picked for all the different loads that we shot. Now the brass we actually chose was SIG brass. One of my subscribers had left a note that, hey, he felt that SIG brass was very good in 300 Win Mag, and it was inexpensive and I saw it on the shelf, and that's what I chose for this project. Obviously, we started off in no particular order: the 150 grain soft pipe by Hornady, the 220 grain Nosler Custom Competition, the 168 grain Classic Hunter by Berger, the 220 grain Sierra Match King, and the 208 grain AMAX. Certainly not the 168 Burgers, but most of the rest of these were actually from some of my work that I was playing around with 300 Blackout, and I had them on the shelf. The 200 AMAX I don't believe is actually made anymore. There may be someone that still has them on the shelf, but there is a 208 grain ELD. I'm not sure the bullet dimensions are exactly the same, but really what we're looking for is to make sure our rifle is going to stabilize all these different weight class of bullets and see if we could zero in on one that was really worth working up properly after our first reloads were shot through the rifle. Now, the two powders that we were going to choose was actually Reloader 26 as well as H1000. For no better reason than I could find enough data to make me comfortable, the two bullets we're going to try with Reloader 26 is the 160 grain Berger Classic as well as the 220 grain Sierra Match King. All the rest will get H1000. I guess there's really no better time than the present to go over it, so the actual loads that we picked, our Reloader 26 will start off with 168 grain Berger. We actually loaded that at 79 grains of Reloader 26, which will prove fatally later in our discussion. We picked a cartridge overall length of 3.340. If you guys are familiar with 300 Win Mag data, most of the SAMI maximum for this cartridge is 3.340. The only exception to this today is the actual 208 grain AMAX data that I found on Hodgkin's website had an overall length of 3.420. When we go to the 220 grain Sierra Match King, our cartridge overall length, like I said, was 3.340. For that projectile, we loaded only 71 grains of Reloader 26. When we moved to the 150 grain soft point, our cartridge overall length was again the 3.340 and 82.5 grains of H1000. For the 208 grain AMAX, we actually bumped our overall length to 3.420, like Hodgkin's website had stated, and picked 75 grains of H1000. Our last projectile weight test is a 220 grain custom competition. Really haven't found anything spectacular with these in any other rifle yet, so I thought we might as well give them a try. The H1000 load we picked for this was again 71 grains of H1000 and back to that 3.340 cartridge overall length. And like we mentioned, this was the first firing of our SIG brass and everything was loaded up with the CCI 250. So armed with all 50 of these rounds, and I actually had some old rounds laying around from our previous 300 Win Mag project that I'd kind of abandoned, I decided I would shoot those up just kind of to make sure that we were on target downrange and get ready to shoot our loads. And this is where everything started to kind of go downhill. I'll spare you most of the groups as they're really nothing to look at. Honestly, I could easily turn this into a 300 Win Mag fail video, but we are trying to press forward. I do think that this rifle will be able to shoot groups. After shooting those old rounds, and I actually shot the first group of the 168 Burgers, after recently dealing with my 338 Lapua shaking itself apart, and this not working very well, we packed it up, figured I would check it out when I got back, and see exactly what we're dealing with. Figured we probably had a loose action screw, a scope ring, or something that wasn't just right, and we'd be able to figure it out on the reloading bench here and take it out the next time. Didn't want to waste all of the ammunition we'd loaded up. At this time, I was still using the lead sled as well, and I was wondering if that was just complicating my ability to hold out at further distance, because we'd went straight from our initial firing, which we did at 50 yards, all the way out to 150 yards where I like to shoot, which irritates everybody I know. So we brought it home, ran the old cleaning rod through it, double-checked all of our screws were tight, and we didn't really find anything wrong. The next time we actually took this out to the range, I was running out of time at the end of the day, as again, a little bit apprehensive because we really hadn't found anything wrong with the rifle to correct, but I figured we'd switch the 220 grain Sierra Match Kings and see what would happen. Again, we were disappointed. The best statistics that I could achieve, the 5-shot string had a standard deviation of 14.5, extreme spread of 37, and it was about the end of the day, so I just figured next time I'm going to start fresh, and we would concentrate a whole day on the 300 Win Mag, and hopefully things would go better. About this time is when Johnny's Reloading Bench had actually posted his 6.5 Creedmoor Thompson Center Compass update video, and he actually showed how he brought his trigger pull down even further from the factory. Let me state before I go any further, I'll be as clear as I possibly can, I am not advising you to do this. At this point, I was willing to give it a whirl. Please keep in mind if you decide to do that modification, your gun is likely not going to be drop safe, and that is completely up to you. But this rifle at this point was only going to be used at the range, and we're just doing some testing, and keep in mind as well, as long as the firearm's unsafe, it doesn't fire regardless. But again, I'm not telling you to do that trigger modification. In fact, I have a better idea, which we'll get to closer to the end of the video. That modification in place, we went back out to the range. I'll put actually a graph on the screen, and you can look at this to your heart's content. This is actually a plot of all of the velocities on all the loads that we shot. Pretty much nothing to write home about. I was very disappointed. The only 5-shot string that we actually could get to have a single-digit standard deviation was the second round of the Berger 168s. And still, that only had an SD of 9.8 with an extreme spread of 26. Now, it's really not entirely fair, but if you were to combine it with the first day we shot, again, a different day, that would have a standard deviation of 17.5 and extreme spread of 61. Probably not fair, but nothing to write home about certainly either. As you can see on the graph on the screen, there's 50 rounds. And keep in mind too, velocities are going up and down, but also keep in mind, both of these are temperature stabilized powders. The H1000 is part of the Hodgins Extreme series, and Reloader 26 is one of Alliance newer powers that is temperature stable. Or at least, that's what it claims to be. Now, out of all the groups, again, nothing to write home about. I think we had about 2 groups that were reasonable. I may or may not put those on the screen to see if I can dig them out of my archive, or if I just burned the footage in effigy. Shooting off the bipod and rear bag did not seem to drastically improve our groups. Like I said, we found 1 or 2 in there, but then at this point, I'm actually afraid that the bipod is causing some of our issue. What I'll explain by that is you'll see I've actually moved the stock from the barrel. We'll get into this towards the end of the video again, but the plastic stock that comes on this, I don't want to say it's kind of flimsy, but if you own one of these rifles, you'll easily be able to tell that you can certainly grab the stock and force the barrel to touch the stock. It's not difficult at all on the plastic sex. So loading the bipod during shooting, I really couldn't tell, but I was afraid possibly that I was actually causing the stock to hit the barrel and affecting the harmonics of the rifle and possibly shifting our point of impact. I really didn't know. The short story over everything is I really just couldn't get this rifle to print a good group. I did have a couple of combos that shot reasonable, but to tell you that I could repeat it, I just don't have the confidence at this time. Since the statistics were so bad overall, I really didn't think we had found anything whatsoever. So basically here we are, 65, 70 rounds in, pretty much feel completely defeated in our project, but we're not going to let this one beat us, at least not yet. At this point, this is what we were going to do going forward. The first thing, since I just didn't know, and honestly it was my long-term plan to go there anyway, you can see we ordered a boyd stock. I'll have a video on that if you haven't seen it already somewhere on the channel. Just doing a quick unboxing and a real rapid install. It's not difficult. There's plenty of other videos out there. I didn't do any fancy bedding, at least not at this point, but we did put the stock in the rifle, did not have any trouble with it, and I will tell you, I really feel that this is a nice stock. But again, we'll go over a lot of the details in that video. The other thing that I intend to change is the trigger. Like I mentioned before, the trigger mod that we performed was really not a long-term solution, and so I ordered something that I thought would be a little bit more drop safe, hopefully after it's completed. Again, guys, I'm not endorsing this, at least not at this point. You'll see on the table here, here's the picture of the card from MCARBO. This is an MCARBO trigger spring kit. They advertise a drastic trigger pull reduction in this rifle. I don't have a trigger pull gauge. I will tell you though, without hesitation, that this certainly does make the trigger much better. To say it's the greatest trigger on the face of the earth, I would certainly be lying to you. However, it's far better than the factory. And they do actually claim that it's drop safe. Again, I'll have another video specifically on that. I haven't dropped it from a ridiculous distance just yet, but I will tell you, the short version is, after its installation so far, I did drop it on the butt pad from a couple feet off of the ground several times, and I couldn't get the trigger to false fire. But again, we'll go over that in another video. I alluded to it earlier in the video. If you haven't seen it already, Johnny's Reloading Bench has actually put out a video specifically on his 300 Winchester Magnum Thompson Center Compass. He mentions in his video one of the fatal flaws that I missed right out of the gate. My assumption was, since they're saying factory match ammo, 1 MOA rifle, that we were going to be able to load what I will call SAMI ammunition, 3.34 inch cartridge overall length ammunition, and it was going to be able to print groups. This thing has a very long throat. If you want to slang a giraffe throat or whatever your favorite slang for that is, it's actually quite a long distance before your projectiles hit the rifling. I did actually measure all the distance it lands on these projectiles, and I don't want to have to bore you with all the details, but I will tell you, going through the things real quick, our Sierra Match Kings are not quite 100 thousandths off the lands. The 168s are 134 thousandths off the lands. The 208 grain AMAX are a whole 190 thousandths of an inch off of the lands. The 220 grain Nosler Custom Competitions are 168 thousandths off the lands. The 100 soft points were 96 thousandths off the lands. So the 220 Sierra Match King and the 150 SP were the only actual projectiles that were under 100 thousandths jump. The good news is the magazine on this rifle is relatively long. A quick measurement with my calipers would insinuate we should get somewhere in the neighborhood of 3.470 inches cartridge overall length. On Johnny's Reloading Bench, it's his videos, I believe he states 3.475. I haven't really pushed that to this limit, but again, I don't like to load so the tips are touching the ends of the magazine very bad, so I would likely back that off 5 thousandths reliably, maybe even 10, depending on if we could find something again that the rifle could shoot. So guys, this was a fatal flaw of mine. Had we actually pushed those overall lengths out a little further, depending how much the bullet was actually left in the neck of the case, it looks like we could, get out to the lands with the 220 grain Sierra Match King, the Nosler Custom Competition. The 208 AMAX looks pretty rough, though we might load that at magazine length just to see if we can. But we do look like that 168 Burger might actually be usable at this point, as well as that 150 grain soft point. Not sure that 150 grain soft point is going to be a long distance projectile, but it would be nice to see if we can print some groups, and I have a lot of them laying around. Doing a quick comparison from his video to mine, it looks like my throat is actually in slightly better shape from one of the projectiles that he gives a reference to, which is the Nosler Custom Competition. It actually looks to me like my throat is a little bit more than 14 thousandths shorter than his. I don't know if you really want to call that luck of the draw, but certainly better than nothing. One of the things too, the groups really certainly weren't the only disappointment here. The statistics overall were pretty bad. I don't know if being further from the lands is going to cause the statistics to be poorer than normal, but overall with the SIG brass, again, these were random charges. Not being able to see at least one single-digit standard deviation across the board was very disappointing. And honestly, I wonder how much that has to do with the brass. Maybe it's really good and we just had bad luck today. Further testing we'll only know going forward. Since I didn't really know, the other change we'll make going forward is we'll try out some new brass. I sent Atlas Development Group an email and they actually sent me 50 pieces of their 300 WinMag product to go through and review. It's very pretty stuff and we'll be talking about it going forward on the channel, but we're certainly going to be able to compare what I will call premium brass. So we have 50 pieces of the Atlas Development Group brass. We have 50 pieces of the SIG brass. Full disclosure, I've actually loaded and fired these 50 pieces, but we're not going to cover in this video because it's way longer than I usually make anyway. So for those of you guys that were dying for the update, here you go. For this point in the discussion, we're only about 70 rounds in and we're not giving up. We're still hoping for some better results. Watching Johnny's Reloading Benches video, I do think there's hope for this rifle. I'm very optimistic that with a few more bugs worked out, we'll be able to get some real performance out of this rifle. Even if you guys hate 300 Winchester Magnum, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any comments or questions, please post those in the comments section below. If you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you can see when I post next week's video, and until then, stay safe in small groups.